Well, welcome everybody. It's so great to see everybody here. First session of the day, and I hear there's an accident on the 405, which is nothing unusual, right? So more people will be streaming in soon. I'm really excited about this panel this morning. I've been fortunate enough to moderate a few panels here at Digital Hollywood over the years, and I just am thrilled with this team that we have together, a really diverse group. So I think you're going to be looking forward to hearing what they have to say today. They really come from a diverse set of backgrounds. We've got researchers here, statisticians, content creators, tech designers, experts in AR, VR, AI. And you know what? They're all hitting the ground running with their ideas, learning, and understanding how to implement these new technologies, and particularly important from the psychological perspective. Underlying all of this, though, is story, and I think you'll hear this as they talk about it. You know, it's the driver of human development and really is the reason why we do things. So please join me while we listen to how they're imagining the future, and not only imagining the future, but also thinking of it text-wise as far as what's good. You know, and this really resonates with my work. I've done a lot of work with media psychology and technology for good, and so I think that as you hear what they're talking about, you can see possible ways that you can implement this in the work that you're doing. So today we're going to talk about virtual reality and some of those areas in immersive media and that psychology of immersion. So very quickly, before I introduce our panel, I just want to give you a few words about myself and let you know why I put this panel together in this way. I'm the director of media psychology at Fielding Graduate University, where we have programs both at master's level and PhD level in media psychology. I'm also a senior research fellow at the Media Psychology Research Center. I co-created a brand psychology and audience engagement certificate. I'm on the advisory board for Internet and Social Marketing Certificate. And also, and this is the one I think that ties in the most with what we're doing today, a former president of the American Psychological Association's Society for Media Psychology and Technology. And my presidential initiative that year was Media Psychology and Technology for Good. So let me go ahead and have each one of our panel members give us a few minutes about themselves so that you can have an idea of what their work is doing, and then we'll have a discussion about it. We have one panel member who is stuck in that traffic jam that I mentioned, and she'll be joining us in just a minute. Do you want to go ahead and start, Ty?
Certainly. So good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to have you here. My name is Ty Crosby. I'm the founder and CEO of Silverthread. We are a virtual reality company that focuses on in-body, true POV learning solutions for enterprise. So what this means is we invented a core technology, and this is really our keystone, that actually transports you into somebody's body so that when you're doing a learning module, you're actually there, hands-on, looking down at everything that takes place in full stereoscopic reality. Now, it sounds like a lot of big words, but essentially this is like capturing a memory and letting somebody jump into that space. Now, this is incredibly important when it comes to productivity. People are what make an organization great, and being able to achieve scalable, easily transmitted solutions that can be deployed all over the world very easy is the second best thing to actually being there and doing in-person training. And we'll show you some demos here shortly.
Thanks. I'm Linda Tournelle, and my specialty is as a behavioral strategist, and I've worked at IBM, Xerox, Apple, and I've worked with robotics companies, the Department of Defense, and a lot of nonprofits, among others. And recently I've also, the last couple of years, been an adjunct professor teaching master's students basically how technology affects human behavior. My current research is in how virtual reality can aid in crisis awareness and behavioral change. So basically that means how VR affects emotions, how virtual environments can be used as motivational tools, and different components of perspective taking, the neuropsychological basis of behavior and emotions, because some people want to know what VR does to their brain. And it's an exciting field, so I'm really enjoying that. But all my work prior to this seems to really play right into where we are with this new medium, and it's a really exciting time. So,
thank you, Linda. Good morning, everyone. Molly Lovak here. I am the founder and CEO of a corporation called Mentor Insight, Inc., and I'd like to start by telling everyone my why I do what I do. I am dedicated my career and my business, and this is why I started my company, to create an Obi-Wan Kenobi type of holographic guru that you can beam into the palm of your hand for help with anything, anywhere, anytime. And my company, which is a media and entertainment company, it's been around for a while. We were established in 2002, and we weren't focused, I felt, enough on that. And so 2 years ago, we shifted our strategy and created the world's very first conference that can convene the top industry minds on the topic of artificial intelligence and the entertainment industry, Hollywood. And it's called AI Showbiz, and I know we're live streaming, so I thought I'd just stand up and show everyone the T-shirt tag, which is Trailblazer Talks and Innovation Fair.
There we go.
My tie into virtual reality, though, just wanted to add a little bit more about, before I dedicated to my focus on artificial intelligence, years ago, I created for Westin Hotels their very first website, and it was in 1995, and it was at that time that we partnered with the University of Washington's Human Interface of Technology Laboratory and Microsoft executives to create the first virtual reality imagined room of the future called the Westin Room 2000. And because of that work, I later joined the Washington Software Association, where I had a very exciting time as, I guess you would call me, the de facto ambassador of all the groups, scientists and researchers coming from Asia and other countries to see the VR that was beginning to emerge back then. So I'm really excited about the topic today, and I'll be sharing some trends that came from the conference our first year that we did back in January. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. And I'm Tanisha Singleton. I am a recent PhD graduate of media psychology. Jerry Lynn was actually my dissertation chair, and I'm very excited to be here right now. My background is in predominantly sports experiences, and that's why that's some of the perspective that I'm going to be bringing here today. I'm also a project manager at Vindabona Productions, doing claiming and digital rights management and partnerships for them. Also, I am the consulting partner at Reality Science, which is the virtual reality tie-in as to why I'm here, which is Reality Science is a startup company doing research and development for virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality, the immersive media space in general. So we're doing research on presence, audience engagement, social experiences, and how to tell stories within VR, because at the end of the day, it's all about the story. And that's really one of the perspectives that I'm going to be adding here today on this panel.
Well, thank you, everyone. So what we're going to do, we'll start out, Ty has a little bit that he's going to show us, and then we'll get into a discussion later, opening it up to questions from the audience. So Ty, first I understand that you're doing a lot of training and development in the virtual reality space, and that you're doing it from that point of view perspective. Can you tell us a little bit about it? And I think maybe you might even let us experience it through video? Okay, great.
Thanks so much. So everything we do in today, and of course we have a lot of visions of what's going to come 6 months from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, but today is pre-captured. So you capture these modules of training, and it gives the employer the ability to transport someone, whether it be a student or it could be an executive, into this remote location and experience it firsthand. So I'm going to show you a very quick demo. This is a capture, 2D capture of what somebody else has actually seen in VR. And we brought a VR headset, so afterwards, after the panel's done, if you guys want to hang around a little bit, I'm happy to throw it in and you can see it firsthand.
Ty, you know what you might be able to do is we have a fielding booth in case there's another panel coming in, and you're more than welcome to bring that and let people come try it there. So
Perfect.
Great idea.
So here you go. So here's a quick little montage of some of the training stuff that we've done. Let's see. Should you guys playing back on here, it's just a soundtrack.
You could
So I'll walk you
take the
through.
mic maybe
No,
and
it's-
switch.
So at the core of this is something, if you look at it, you say, what if you have somebody that's working on an incredibly expensive piece of equipment, and you want to introduce this skill set without actually putting a new trainee in front of a $30 or $50 million aircraft? This allows somebody to actually experience what that technician is doing firsthand, and by utilizing the firsthand capture, the brain is experiencing this as if they're there. It's just playing back through the brain. It's not that. It's fine. Just absorb it. So the second part of this is you're able to now learn firsthand from the best person. So in an organization, we all wish that central character, the absolute master of that skill set, was able to train each one of your employees, or even if you're able to introduce them to that individual. Oftentimes that's not possible. So we're able to go ahead and put you in the room with that perfect master, and you're able to do these skill sets. Now when you're doing these skill sets, this is appearing in full stereoscopy, so you're seeing this and perceiving this the same way your brain perceives reality, and so it leaves a very deep impression. And last but not least, but it's very key, we have a lot of questions from individuals about things along the lines of empathy training, how do we get our workforce deeper engaged, how do we as a company showcase that we're really innovative and cutting edge, and by utilizing things like onboarding videos in this fashion, you can actually have somebody come in and literally meet the CEO, shake their hand, and have these experiences as if they were there. Now the real fun of this goes, this is just the playback side, but what happens when you go a step further and you start implementing testing? So in one of our modules, this could be a series could be loaded up, whether it be OSHA training modules, or in this case it's a California required EMS training. In this case, the individual is fully in VR. They're able to have an HR representative load up what training they need to do. They're able to dive into that training, and as they go through this training, they're dynamically presented with different questions. And depending on how they answer those questions, not only is it going to report that score back to an LMS system, but it can actually dynamically drive them into new content to help reinforce the schools that we know need to be migrated and worked upon. So we'll see that here in just 1 second. So he's telling you what you need to know, and the trick here is this is a refresher course, but we now are challenged by the test based on what we were just hearing in the lesson. And if we don't answer this correctly, we're not going to proceed dynamically. And the fun part is, given the fact that this is all taking place in VR, we're able to not only capture this content, but we can drive it with both with active presentation, where you'll be challenged with this information, as well as completely passive content gathering, which means because we know where the individual, the trainee, is looking while they're in this course, we don't even need to challenge them with a question. We can call out and say, you weren't paying attention to the right area. We're going to drive them into something else. So this is something that's entirely unique within VR that allows for so much more to occur.
That's really interesting. So I'm curious, right now you're working in the medical area. Are there other areas that you're working in as well
We certainly
that
are.
you can share with us?
Finding some of the greatest traction and really the people that are leading this course are the large consulting firms. Some of the largest consulting firms, they're on that cutting edge, and they're taking that first step. And there have been some incredible stories of productivity increases. So we were recently in Germany for one of the world's largest consulting firms, and they have very unique challenge. They have these very highly skilled consultants that are working on multi-million-dollar projects, and yet they can never put them in front of a client until they're experts. So how do you train somebody to be an expert, and how do you skip beyond that phase of going, oh my goodness, this is a shock, I've never been here. So we had access to a very high-tech location in Germany, and we did sort of a how it's made summary training course for these experts, and it's sort of like the MBA for them in training and actually what they'll be doing with the client, so that when they get in front of the client, they are truly experts in that space. And the fun part is they are diving into things along the lines of everything from safety training, hard skills. One of the biggest areas is soft skills. How do you train somebody to truly understand diversity? It's one of the hardest things. And we all know, well, desktops, PCs was a major learning platform. Now it's mobile. Well, guess what? The new thing is virtual reality. What if you can place somebody literally in somebody else's shoes to experience that same scenario and train them how to have some soft skills, and not only how to better empathize, but also how to better engage and discuss that scenario.
So this right now is all asynchronous, but the goal is to maybe possibly you go into some type of a lifetime?
Absolutely. The
Okay.
goal down the road is going to have this sort of technology. We're going to be able to have next step, and this is the fun next step. As you're demonstrating here, you can see the individual's hands being demonstrated, but the fun part is because VR allows for this, we're working with some companies right now where you're actually able to see the skill demonstrated and then grab a virtual object using your real hands and demonstrate whether or not you're able to do that skill correctly. And the fun part here, and this is for the AR, VR people, VR is this sort of continuance of opacity. So virtual reality is fully opaque. AR is being able to see through, and there's this back and forth between them. We're going to see more and more devices really in the next 6 months that allow for that change between them. So you're going to have a scenario where you're able to see this in complete opaqueness, be in that expert's body, and then all of a sudden jump back, see your own hands, but be able to grab a virtual device and demonstrate the skill that you just learned.
Wow. Well, so Molly, I know you're our resident AI expert here, and I think a lot of the things that Ty was talking about as far as the information that they were tracking, we're using artificial intelligence do they need to go back and retrain in a certain section and all. And since you're our expert and I know you're up on the trends, we really want to hear about what trends you see in immersive media.
One of the big ones we found from the people who spoke at the conference is this trend from into Micromass Customization. So just as you're hearing about this incredible course, imagine if each person who took the course, thanks to AI being put on top of the AR, VR, it could be customized to your own personal needs. Maybe there's a certain kind of expert training that you need to learn in a different way. Maybe you're more of a audio learner, so there need to be more audio cues. AI will embed the customization abilities because of the mass data sets that it can analyze and segment for each individual person. So that's one of the fun ones. Another one, how many people have seen Guardians of the Galaxy, the movie that just came out? So in that film, Chris Pratt will basically change from being a regular human. He kind of hits himself on the side of the face, and all of a sudden appearing, it's this great visual effect, is this armor that allows him to have all these magical superpowers. Well, the rise of the hybrid human is coming, and this is because with AI, literally, we can have Einstein inserted into our brain. There's just an infinite amount of knowledge that we can have access to, but the difference is with AI, it allows us to make sense of it all, to categorize it, to bring it back in a way that we can make sense of it. So those are two trends that people were talking about. I don't know if we have any filmmakers in here today or aspiring filmmakers. The final trend I'll mention is just the ability to use AI for getting financed because it allows you to pull in audience sentiments and the metrics behind them so that when you go and pitch your script or your idea to someone, you can show this is going to be a blockbuster, and here's the data to stand behind it, and that's really what it's coming to now. So those are three exciting trends. There are so many of them. I guess I will end on one final note. I like to follow Mark Zuckerberg because he recently made a big shift into artificial intelligence, and I don't know if anybody saw his post from now 2 days ago. But he wrote he's going on a listening tour. He's basically traveling across the United States and meeting with people to try and figure out how he can use AI, not just to connect you with friends and family that maybe you've lost touch with, but to actually send you suggestions of who you should know based on what you're trying to accomplish. I think this is very exciting. It goes back to my Obi-Wan Kenobi guru. It's the beginning of that. So a lot of exciting things happening now in AI. We're going to be doing the conference again next year where we'll be releasing more trends as well as a newsletter we'll have with micro news about it. So thank you.
If I can,
yeah. No, go right
No,
ahead. 'Cause I
one of the trends that you were talking about in terms of sentiment analysis is a huge trend, and is something that I think is really going to be a driver in this immersive media space, because that's when you're allowed to have research inform the design of content creation. And if you can actually have the data behind it, like, okay, these are the sentiments, these are the emotional drivers that are pushing the needle, the gauge, one way or the other in terms of like content creation, in terms of design that you can do, that's a human-centered design in VR or AR and AI, then that's really going to be something that you can glean a lot of information from, and which can make deals go north or south.
Oh, absolutely. And again, when you put that Micromass Customization on top of it, I was giving an example in an earlier panel. Imagine you're watching a film, but you are, say you're a vegan, and the film takes place in a steakhouse. The film that you would get might be taking place in Moby's Little Pine vegan restaurant instead. That type of customization is what you're talking about with audience sentiment. It's going to be possible in growing ways in VR as well as AI applications, I believe.
And Linda, I know you're doing stuff with sentiment analysis as well. Do you have anything else that you want to add to that?
It's really important, and it's difficult. And I don't think people realize how nuanced language can be. And specifically with slang language, cultural language, sarcasm, irony, those types of things that come up in language, it's very, very, very hard to find exactly what does that sentiment mean. And so for human beings, it would just take lifetimes to understand it with all the data that they have from human language. But in AI, you've got artificial intelligence, you've got algorithms, you've got machine learning, and machines are able to distill that information and come to better conclusions on what sentiment really is and how to measure it. So, but we're not quite there yet, but that's the direction that we'll be going. So, but right now, in my research that I'm doing, I'm actually using sentiment analysis, and it was very hard to find any information about how to do it, and the books that I do have that have just been recently released, to do it, I mean, it's absolutely impossible to really code all the themes and all the language without help with machines. It's almost impossible.
Well, I think one of the other trends that Molly was talking about, and which we're going to with sentiment analysis being one piece of that, is that customization. And I know we're talking right here about, the immersion factor. And so really what I'd like to ask the panel is that customization going to make us more immersive into the experience or not? I know it was a hotly debated topic in my group of people at the cocktail hour last night. So any thoughts on that?
So from a practical near-term application, one thing that we're dealing with now, this year is going to be the real year for story-branched architecture. So within virtual reality, because we're able to now know individually where you're looking and what you're doing, now all of a sudden you can drive the outcome in different fashions. Now, there might not be billions and billions and billions of different outcomes yet, but there are a certain number of permutations. So we recently did a piece, it was unfortunate, it was a very hard piece to do and had a lot of real constraints that were because of the level of impact, the potential of impact. But it was a piece on anti-bullying that was aimed for middle schoolers. And part of the beauty of this is you have to weigh in what is the role, and knowing that there's so deep a level of immersion, the last thing you want to do is to cause harm. At the same time, the ideal scenario is you actually give the viewer the ability to control the outcome. Now, sometimes they might not even know that they're controlling the outcome. In a perfect world, it would be completely seamless. And the experience that two different students would receive, they'd actually have two dynamically different outcomes. So in one scenario, unfortunately, one of the kids commits suicide. In another scenario, the child does not. And keep in mind, this is all presented, this isn't for entertainment, this is presented as a core piece of technology that is embedded within a curriculum, within guided discussion by a teacher. But the beauty here would be, what if those two students came out and they said, oh my goodness, I can't believe that person just did that. And the next person says, what do you mean that didn't occur? And so seeing this, all of a sudden you have these multitudes of different outcomes, which in turn can drive the discussion. So all of a sudden you said, what did we do as human beings to drive that? At what point? What if you don't know? It wasn't just a presentation, do you want to do this or this? If you didn't even know what you did, and we have completely unique experiences, it really helps drive that thought and really helps achieve a much deeper level of knowledge because you're able to discuss it very actively versus passively.
I wanted to add one of the speakers at AI Showbiz, Nova Spivak, very accomplished person in AI. He was behind the architecture that's in Siri. He was talking about this concept. I really like how he frames it. He said previously entertainment and experiences were leaned back. They were very passive. We would turn on the television and watch. And then they became leaned forward with games and more interactivity. And now I believe that the answer is much more immersive because they're really now at the edge of our seats. When you're embedded, like what you were demonstrating, it is, you are on the edge of your seat. I mean, it is so real. You can reach out and basically touch it, that I do believe that this will make it much more immersive and also give us the ability to get into that state of flow where everything else disappears. We are just completely consumed with experience.
So it's interesting that you're saying that because I definitely have experienced when I'm in a VR experience, that type of, really feeling totally immersed in in it. And yet, when we're talking about the customization with the, different sentiment analysis, et cetera, it made me think, is it going to become a more passive experience? Are we going back to something's being pushed to us because they now think this is what we want to see, and we're no longer needing to go out and sort of check things out and investigate and research, which might make us a little bit more engaged in the experience. So that's really a toss-up, but I'm glad that you brought that up.
Yeah, I would just add one more point. I think that it will be more immersive because the audience, the person who's about to have the experience, will actually get to dictate, choose, select what they want, almost an a la carte menu. So they're much more involved. It's a much more engagement happening.
Right.
If I could add something as well. In the immersive environments that I've been able to partake, especially at the Stanford Human Interaction Lab, and Jeremy Bailenson has been doing some great work on racism, and where he actually, they call it perspective taking, where you actually put someone in a virtual environment and then say it's, or the one, let me give this example, where Roger Goodell, the head of the National Football League, he went and saw the lab and asked Jeremy, he says, is there something you can do to help my players stop, beating on their wives and their girlfriends? Is virtual reality, can they help me, change some of the behavior that, seems to be systemic in some of the teams? And he says, of course they can. So what they did is they took these big, huge football players and they put them in the VR experience, and all of a sudden they'd look at their hands, and they're these tiny little hands of a woman, and they look at themselves and they're like, oh my God, I'm a woman, and they're little, and they're 5'2", and all of a sudden they look up and here's this big guy coming at them talking like this, and using all these gestures, and and all of a sudden they're going, oh my God, now I can see, I'm taking the perspective of how my behavior might be really threatening to someone of a different size or a different gender. And the ability to put someone in a perspective, and whether it is, to help with racism or gender issues or domestic violence issues, is incredibly profound. And that's what I research as well, are the emotional reactions of what happens inside a VR experience. Now, maybe I'm researching specifically on crisis, but a lot of these instances we're talking about, racism and perspective taking, has to do with personal crisis. Now, we all think humanitarian crisis, but it's also a personal crisis. So this particular medium we've never had access to before, and it's unbelievably powerful to elicit strong emotions. And all research that I've been able to see says that the stronger the emotion, the more apt there is to be behavioral change. And that is huge when you're talking about these kinds of issues. So when you're looking at something that Ty's going to be doing, he could go to the police, force and say, hey, let's put you in a perspective where you're no longer the police officer, you're an 18-year-old kid of a particular race, and how does that look? How does that feel to be approached by several police officers, brandishing weapons? And that perspective shift can really make a profound difference in how we view our lives and how our communities interact with each other.
So Linda, really as a follow-up to it, and I think you started to address that, but really, how are you seeing that VR is pushing the boundaries of journalism and documentaries?
Yeah, thanks, Jerry Lynn. That is just an amazing thing to witness, and it appears almost weekly that they're going in even deeper into this subject. You had last year a company called Riot, R-Y-O-T, and they were bought out by AOL Huffington Post, and they were one of the first that really went to conflict areas around the world with their 360, their cameras, and then they'd come back and they'd stitch together into a VR experience and show what was happening out there. And then the interesting thing is the fact that AOL Huffington Post bought them, and now this last year they've been going to all their different places all over the world saying, hey, we need you to train these people on how to do VR and 360 video and VR to showcase news stories and in quicker time as well. And then recently CNN just announced CNN VR. And so they're going into that area. So you are going to see very, very quickly, if you already haven't been aware of it, news being brought to you in this immersive environment. Now you go, okay, well, what does that mean? Well, Nielsen recently did a study partnered with Yumi, and they found that in an immersive environment, you're 27% more engaged than you would be with a flat environment. Well, that was for a branding study, and I think when you're looking at, should I buy, a piece of clothing or this T-shirt she's on, it doesn't have the emotional impact that it would if you saw a crisis in VR. So if you look up like Clouds Over Sidra, and that was announced about a year and a half ago, and the UN brought that in. It's a perspective of a 12-year-old girl in Syria and the effects of the war and what she went through. Well, when the VR story of that went to the UN, the people in the UN, they were like, oh my God, we've got to do something. Culturally, across the board, everyone felt the same emotion for this. So they were able to implement change rapidly. Now, they still roll that out occasionally in different areas so that people can see this. But now Chris Milk is doing a lot of VR in crisis and humanitarian, bringing light to things. You still have Stanford doing it, the acidification of the oceans, they're doing that. You've got a lot of people doing a lot of really interesting things. People now, I think, you're going to start seeing even Vice News, where you go in and with this whole fake news thing that's going on, you're going to be able to say, well, I'm in it, and I'm looking, and it's as if I'm there. So I'm seeing bombs going off. I'm seeing things happening as if I'm there because that's the actual footage of what happened. Then you can experience, you can choose where to look and how to feel and therefore determine your behavior and your decision making after that. So it can be a really, really profound way to view the news, as well as, like Ty was saying, to increase your knowledge base. And if people are not trusting the media, maybe they will trust a first-person experience when they see it for themselves. I don't know. It's just now evolving in that area.
So to follow up on this, because this is so critical, and it's this ability for the technology to move forward, to allow for the cost to come down, to allow for proliferation of these experiences to get out there. But at the core of this, we have terms like first-hand account. If you're in a court of law, first-hand account has a lot more value over something like hearsay or I saw it on a screen. This technology truly allows you to occur. The moment you have the freedom to look around in that space and you're actually there, especially when you're there in POV where you're a person, not just a static camera, but that ability to be there allows you to create your own memory of what occurred. And all of a sudden it starts shifting. It goes from short-term memory of I saw a show, it was great, I talked about it for a couple days, I forgot about it. I don't remember what I watched 2 days ago. I don't remember what I read on my phone an hour ago. All of a sudden, if I have a very real experience at lunch, if I have a very real experience that I experience personally, it's very real. Somebody brought something up that's a little bit scary, but also kind of wonderful. I have 2 children, 7 and 9. And they said, you fast forward 10, 20 years, and the kids of the future are going to go, Mom, Dad, oh my God, do you remember when we went to Disneyland? It was great. It was so fantastic. And the parents are going to look at each other and go, we never went to Disneyland. But at a certain point, this is bringing up the ethics as well, but what point do you have a crossover? We did a piece for Duke University where we were tasked with showcasing to a great number of donors that had supported a cause for doing additional research in autism, what it might be like to be that individual. Now, this is very subjective, and it's something where we approach with great care to do our best, but we're able to, for 1 minute, take these individuals and put them in the body of an 11-year-old girl with autism at a birthday party. And by shifting the senses and changing how you experience that interaction, well, nobody knows precisely. We all perceive the world differently. We're able to get somebody to truly pause and create an actual memory. So the next time they're interacting with somebody with autism, not only they say, oh, I read it in a book, or I kind of get it, I should sort of act this way, hopefully they go, oh, I understand that, or I have a glimpse of what that might be like, and therefore I have a deeper level of compassion. And therefore, most importantly, I'll open up my wallet, write a check, drive a cause, give power, and make change in this world, which we need more than ever today, please.
Yeah, I wanted to add, one of the people that we collaborate works with Deepak Chopra, and his name is Punacha, and they have pioneered some VR meditation goggles, and they're looking at post-traumatic stress disorder and meditation, and how the well-being side of all of this is infinite. A very exciting area.
Yeah, I think, and I think this is great. Actually, we do have one of our panel members is going to be talking about some of the well-being. Kieran Kitt just was able to join us. What I'd like to move, so we've talked about a little bit about healthcare. We've talked about documentaries and journalism. I'd like to turn it to sports and entertainment. And so, Tanisha, I just wanted to ask you, how are you seeing sports leagues, et cetera, being able to implement this? And then we'll move to Karen to see what she's doing with it in the conscious world.
Yeah, well, with sports and entertainment, I think it's really about additive content. In my research about fandom and the sports media ecosystem, the experience is greater than the game. The experience itself. That is rooting for a team, booing the other team, cheering for my favorite player, being able to now tweet players directly, live streaming games on Twitter now. Like all of these things, it's about the experience behind the sport itself that is greater and valued more than the game itself. So being a fan isn't anything new, but what has changed are the ways we identify with and experience sport. And that's when the integration of VR becomes really intriguing and interesting, because it's getting us closer to the game, that edge of your seat that you were talking about earlier. Now I'm there. Take me to the huddle. Take me inside a timeout. Take me in the locker room. Let me go to Madison Square Garden. Let me see places that I've never been before. That's where VR can be so interesting, because it's revolutionary in terms of the accessibility and the commercialization of itself. Because with VR and sports and entertainment, I think it's very hard to imagine, at least for me, and maybe for someone. Has anybody seen a basketball game or football in VR, seen sports in virtual reality whatsoever? You guys have. I know you guys have. But it's hard to imagine sitting there watching an entire game for 3 hours with an isolating headset on my face. So that's where it has to be additive. I can't imagine swapping a Super Bowl party where it's a social group-oriented experience and having that now become an isolated experience. Sport itself is tribal. It's about group membership. It's about connection. It's about jeering and cheering for other people. So that experience is greater than the game. That's what I'm talking about. And that's what I mean in terms of having additive content. You have to complement the game with the technology, not replace the game with technology. It's about complementing it. And so what I would like to see a little bit more is this additive idea of transmedia storytelling being adopted in sports and entertainment, where you're seeing content be dispersed systematically across this unified story experience, and it's all adding to the experience. It's all being complementary to the game itself. It's allowing you to have some type of branded entertainment experience that is going to complement the game, supplement the game, and boost the overall experience by taking fans, taking consumers to places that they've never been before.
Wow. Yeah.
And I'd like to add to that too, in terms of the storytelling, Tanisha, that's so critical in your area, the sports and fandom, but also when you're in VR, any VR experience, and specifically humanitarian crisis or perspective taking, it's really important to have a story, or else it's just plain violence. It doesn't make any sense. And the way the brain is wired as well, the brain wants to understand things in a sequential order and have some sort of meaning and order to it. So the whole framework of storytelling has become incredibly important in the VR experience. And because when you are immersed, you need to be able to go from one thing to another and not be constantly bombarded with emotions. It's just emotional overload. And at that point, you wonder, is it too emotional? What's the impact on the brain if it's just too emotional? And I think with a proper storyline and adhering to a narrative structure, you're going to get a much better experience in VR, no matter if you're looking at sports or participating in, viewing a crisis or meditating even. You need to have some level of story, which is really great for content providers, because now you've got, especially those that are writers, you've got a real nice new medium where your skills will be, are needed.
Yeah, because with story, the importance of story in VR, like you said, it can't be understated, and it's just so important because we're all natural storytellers. We're innate storytellers. We've been telling stories since before the wheel. And so the way I like to think of it is, if technology is a car, story has to be the driver, taking the car somewhere, making it participatory, making it relevant. The story is what's the engine which is pushing this technology forward and taking it somewhere. And if you don't have any of that, then you can get rejection instead of retention, because that's what you want. You want to have retention. You want to have this not be a one-and-done experience. I don't want to put a headset on and just be like, oh, that's cool, and then set it down and then never try it on again. At one point, you want to be able to have this become a part of your identity, and this is something that is giving me something. Know your why. Why am I doing this? Why am I choosing VR? Why am I choosing AR? These have to be conscious decisions and choices that you make. And story, since we're all natural storytellers, it's just behooving to use it to drive the story, drive the technology, so that it's not just a one and done thing, and that VR is real, because it is so powerful, and the opportunity and the possibilities of what the technology can do is so vast. You would be doing a disservice to the technology if you're not having a story involved in there in some way, shape, or form.
And Karen, you're all about story, right? So, matter of fact, I think you're 360 story capturing it right now.
We're actually in Facebook Live 360 right now, so everybody at home can watch us and listen to us.
Awesome. So you've done a lot of work in the 360 VR space, especially what I'm impressed is, with sustainability and with consciousness. So can you tell us what you're doing and where you expect that to take us in the future?
Of course. I mean, to tap onto the storytelling aspect, you see these miraculous VR technology companies that are making these super elaborate 8K cameras, 24K cameras, but there's no storyline. Yeah. And that's what they're missing, and that's why there isn't such a large consumer basis, especially for sports. Like, I'm friends with the head of VR for NBC, and that's one thing that they're struggling with, is getting people to commit to that subscription, getting them to commit. So, there's more than one aspect. Yes, there's the headset. Yes, there's a tablet. There's your laptop, which is kind of a little bit harder to kind of access VR content. And then, of course, your phone. So, you have options. So if you want to watch part of it in your headset, for that 3 hours, and you want to watch the rest of it, even on your TV, Apple TVs now have the little scroll tab, like we are in the future. So the aspect of consciousness and our conscientious multimedia lifestyle company, Truth for Gold, it's the immersive truth on sustainability. I've been studying sustainability my whole life. I grew up at the Biosphere 2 Dome. I've done large oil missions out in Texas, working with the top oil industries, getting them to be more sustainable. And I moved back about a year ago and said, we need to put this in the media. We have to do this. So we're a relatively new company. We started about a year ago, but I've developed and written a VR script for a VR movie script that is full immersive, cinematic docudrama comedy. What did she say? And that's how I know how to describe it, because the docudrama aspect being each character is their true self. So Ben Vereen is Ben Vereen. Jaden Smith is Jaden Smith. Jermaine Jackson Jr. is Jermaine Jackson. So it's real. We want to put people into the situation of what the future looks like if we don't take care of our planet. And then we want to take them back into the solutions and show them all the solutions to economic and environmental sustainability, including power, natural health, new education, and family justice. And they all intertwine. And Molly Lovak, she also runs the Sustainable Business Council on top of Mentor Insight in the AI showbiz. Like, this woman is a rock star, and I'm sure that everyone else on this panel and everyone in here are also rock stars. So the conscientious lifestyle is so important. So, I'm talking to the heads of all the major motion picture studios. They're like, well, so you've got sustainability, okay, so, how are we going to sell that? How are we going to make money? So I was like, okay, I have to make this a full entertainment piece where no one knows that it's about sustainability. They'll just be like, oh, that's the movie where they ran out of oxygen in the planet, and 3 years from now, that's what people are going to say about this. And so that's a little hint. And it's a concept that's never been done before. I mean, when have you ever seen a movie where it shows you an Armageddon situation where we've run out of oxygen and we have to live inside of a Biosphere 2 dome or a living habitat? There hasn't been anything like that, so we don't understand that fear. So tapping into that fear that we're all feeling right now with what's going on politically, of the turnaround for the renewable industries, natural health for our healthcare, this is the fear that we're tapping into, but then entertaining them with the comedy and the docudrama scenario. So storyline is so important. Do not forget the story. Worry about the quality second, but always have quality as well.
Well, I'm hearing from all of you something about perspective taking and that idea that, we can be changed by it. So I'm going to start out with Linda, but I think all of you might want to join in. That idea of, what role does perspectives taking play in VR and behavioral change? Because I think we're all saying it's going to make a difference. It is connecting us and changing human behavior. So Linda, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. When you adopt another person's perspective, research has found that, especially in a virtual environment, that goes without saying, that's what we're talking about, increases your feelings of empathy, helping behavior increases, and attitude change occurs. So if you really look at that, taking someone else's perspective in an immersive environment where you feel that it's real, your brain assumes it's real. I mean, your brain cannot distinguish between what's real in real life and virtual life. The brain thinks it's real. So when you're generating another perspective and you're generating those emotions, you will change your behavior, or the potential to change your behavior is there. The potential to become more empathetic is also there. And a change of perspective. Well, whatever environments you all live in and work in right now, imagine applying that to where you live and where you work and your concerns. It's huge. I mean, it's huge. And with that, of course, comes the ethical considerations, making sure that what we're showing and where we're leading people emotionally is appropriate and honest. But at the same time, that perspective taking cannot be underestimated. And in every one of these areas that we're talking about here, we'll see it. And in real-world environments, it's a little bit harder. To get somebody to understand it, to have the knowledge is harder. I mean, they've got to be, but in a virtual, you're interacting with the knowledge. You're interacting. There's a company down in Santa Barbara called WorldViz, and they work with a company in New York that is just doing first responder training in virtual reality. And because what they found, neuroscientists have found, that when you're in a high-stress environment, whether you're a police officer or a physician in an emergency room, or somebody on an oil rig when all of a sudden everything's going crazy and there's a fire or something, you need to be able to totally get calm, and they have to understand what's going on in the brain, what's firing off in the amygdala, what is that doing hormonally, to your body, and your ability to make decisions in a crisis situation. So they're finding that in a virtual environment, if you can simulate the crisis for these first responders and these people like you were showing, even physicians doing in the emergency room, that when the crisis actually hits, they're not in crisis mode in their brains. So they're able to be calm. You know, their amygdala is not firing off. They go, I know this. I've been here before. I've seen this. Same thing with medical students. If they're out there and they're working on cadavers, that's one thing. But all of a sudden, they're starting to slice up a human being and their blood flows all over. They don't understand that. They've never experienced it. But in a virtual environment, they can. They can experience that kind of blood flow that they would find in a real scenario. And that changes how they treat people and their effectiveness as a physician. So, I mean, it can go, I can keep going on. It can permeate every area of our society and every area that I can actually think of. And which is why we're all up here and so excited, but also very cautious, wanting to make sure it's taken care of in an appropriate and responsible way.
So, go ahead.
With AI, it might help on the entertainment side to combat piracy and copyright infringement, which is a really big problem. If someone is immersed in VR and experiences, you know, the ethical bad side of stealing in that manner, it could possibly help with that big problem. But one other perspective from AI, imagine learning the machine's perspective, the robot's perspective. That now is possible, where someone was talking about Sophia from Hanson Robotics, and Sophia is able to learn on her own and have her own decisions about things and her own personality. Maybe not yet a woman's intuition, as we were talking about yesterday, but some of that is happening. So it is fascinating to see.
And you'll see her at the Oscars next year.
Yes,
Sophia.
we learned that Sophia, this robot, if anybody's seen her on 60 Minutes, is going to be presenting, I believe, at the Oscars next year. And someone named Anne Greenberg, who was here yesterday, who's been involved, is a pioneer in this arena, was just talking about, you know, when Sophia was getting developed, looking at her and making her look a certain way and act a certain way, that just all the things that went into creating this very lifelike, human-like robot.
Speaking of robots, you guys definitely want to watch Eve's Bergquist's panel. That's happening today, isn't it?
Well, that was yesterday that I was actually on
well,
it.
then if you caught it yesterday, Eve's Bergquist, he was one of the AI specialists that I interviewed at AI Showbiz conference, and he was talking about the fact that now robots can use the same aura technology. There's aura detecting cameras, so that would determine human emotion. So robots could actually determine human emotion. So he's talking about the optics. So there's like, you know, actual robots, and then of course AI like Pandora. You know, there's so many different types. So.
Yeah, it's a fascinating new world.
To bring it back a touch to what Linda was sharing on perspective change and learning, you know, the other thing here is we have to figure out how can we relearn things. Learned behavior, unfortunately, oftentimes is paramount to a master instructing you on something. So with a show of hands without your insurance watching, who here used their cell phone on their drive into work today? Anyone? So I'll be honest here for a second, right?
To admit it. Yeah.
So the reality here is I have learned behavior that I've been doing this for the last 10 years, arguably successfully. And so despite what anyone, no matter how much respect I have for them, tells me, my brain says, based on my cumulative statistical study that I know based on me, it's safe. Now, unfortunately, for times when that could cause grave harm, it's very hard to do. One way this comes up is in OSHA training. You look at this, and there's literally billions of dollars of charges that occur because of accidents that occur every day in the workplace. And if you have somebody who's in his 40s and he's been a scaffolding rigger for the last 30 years, and he's exceptional at it, he started very young, by the way, but he's exceptional at what he does, and he comes in and he doesn't clip on for that one place because, you know what, for the last 15 years, he hasn't been clipping. And who's the safety guy who comes around once a month to sign off on it? And sure, he clips in when Joe, the safety guy, is there, but he's not going to clip in when he's doing it because he knows it's safe because he's been doing it. How do you retrain that? And with the ability to go into VR and the ability to have perspective change, all of a sudden you can put him quite literally in somebody else. And this isn't CGI, this isn't some make-believe. It's a completely real scenario where you look down and that's me, those are my hands, and unfortunately with the beauty of Hollywood special effects, we can very traumatically instill a memory of what happens if they don't do that correctly. And the idea is in certain dangerous scenarios or oil rigs, all these places, you can showcase a veteran that knows what to do, these black swan events in such a real way that you just might have a small chance of triggering a new event, a new occurrence of learning, and hopefully a little more safety.
Well, great. I think this is a perfect time to open it up to the audience and see what kind of questions you have out there for the panel. Yes?
So I really appreciate all you're presenting and your optimism and excitement, and at risk of raining virtual rain on the virtual parade. Some of the things you brought up are frightening, and the power of these tools to create experiences indistinguishable from reality have real danger to them. Don't you see that there's the possibility of a bad actor taking some experience, making it a false experience, but giving it that believability, can train people in the wrong direction? And we don't have a truth police, as we've been seeing in the last couple of years.
So if I can paraphrase, and also for the people that are watching it on the webcast, your question really is on the ethics. And can we do, we're talking about all these positive possibilities of virtual reality, but what are the possible negative effects? And if it has the power to train someone in a positive way, could it also, but with a bad actor or something like that?
Even a step further, McLuhan warns us that every extension has a corresponding amputation. There's huge danger in this. What do you recommend doing to prevent these dangers from being misused?
Okay, so and what do you recommend to prevent these dangers? Go ahead.
You know, I'll start with that. The research I'm doing currently is exactly that, and it's in a very small scale because most research you have to take a very tiny sliver of something to research it effectively. But it is wondering, is something too emotional when you view, say, a crisis in VR? Can it be just too emotional? And when I say is it too emotional, yes, we know VR can do wonderful things like, treat and cure, in some cases, PTSD. But I'm wondering, can it give people PTSD? There's been a number of times I've been in a virtual environment where I have ripped that headset off faster than I can tell you, because I know this is not okay for me. I'm too afraid. And there is the risk of people not even knowing what their phobias are. We talk about, implicit racism. Some people don't even know they're racist until confronted with a situation. Imagine if we don't even know what our own fears really are and our own phobias, or we have repressed memories and they're repressed. And we, knowing, understanding neuroscience, we know they're in there. They're just not forward where you can recall them, but they're there. So what if in an immersive environment it brings those forward? Now where are we? So those things are very, very real. And when you say, what can we do about it? Well, we can educate the content providers, people that are doing content and creating environments. Yeah, they should probably have a behavioral, person that understands human behavior. I do think there's a correlation. I mean, you have to have, I understand human behavior, and I'm creating something that will change human behavior. So those two things have to be married. You can't just create content because willy-nilly because it looks fun and you're scaring the bejesus out of people. You just can't do that in a virtual environment. The consequences are too high. But then it also comes down to your individual ability to say, I know myself fairly well, and that doesn't work for me. So I'm going to be careful here. You've got to take personal responsibility with this medium more so than with any other medium is my feeling on it.
That personal responsibility has to also lie on the content creator themselves too, because as well, absolutely, because the ethics involved are very extreme. I remember an experience that I went in at VR on the Lot at Paramount last year, and it was in a coffin. And it was around Halloween time, so it was like a spooky kind of thing. And you remember what I'm talking about?
I was there. That's where I know you from.
Yeah, and so I see this coffin, and I was like, what the hell is this? And then he was like, would you like to be buried alive or cremated?
Oh.
And I was like, buried alive? So I did this strictly for research. Like, this is the only reason why I got in there, because I was just so fat. I was like, what the hell are you people doing? But I did it. And it was about a 5-minute short film. I forget the name of it. But I go ahead and go into this experience, and I was sweating. My heart was racing. I was like, they didn't have me sign anything. Those were my only options. That was the only thing that they told me, buried alive or cremated. And I was like, if you put this on anybody else that has some type of psychological, do you know how much trouble you people, like, the ramifications of that are just so extreme. And like you said, there has to be a personal responsibility too. Why the hell did I get in it? And then also, like, on their end too, warning us and waivers and things like that.
I wanted to add, I believe the day will come just as movies are rated that VR
Absolutely.
experiences, there will be a
Well,
governing
I am going to
body.
jump in there because I was going to bring it, but there are regulations. It is very much like the Wild Wild West right now, and we, as psychologists, we're doing research and we're going as fast as we can to have understanding. We also realize in some places it's just not ethical. You don't want to put a headset on a 2-year-old to find out whether it's okay to put a headset on a 2-year-old. But next week, so I'm a part of IEEE, which is the International Electrical Engineers, and but they embrace people that aren't. It's not just engineer-based. And next week, up in Santa Clara, they're having a full-day meeting where they're bringing people in internationally to try to put together these guidelines for virtual and augmented experiences, especially headset experiences, that we've been meeting now for 6-9 months. I don't think that in one day you're putting it together, but there are attempts by different organizations to do that, and I do think that we will probably get into some kind of rating standards and things, but the reality of the matter is, first of all, we aren't right now, and second of all, many of you guys are in the entertainment industry, and you do want to create evocative experiences, so maybe it's more of being an informed consumer about it. I know we have somebody in the panel, and was your question related to this? So let's go ahead and get your question and keep that conversation going.
I actually really want to tap on this aspect because since the dawn of history of television in general, we have been trained as a society to crave drama, to crave horror. When you're a kid, you're like, oh, you're not going to watch that horror film, and I'm like traumatized from The Ring, like because I watched it so young, right? So we have been doing it wrong since the beginning, and now when it comes to virtual reality, there's so much more pressure, right? And especially when directors have no problem creating slasher films or creating a coffin experience. They don't get any pressure from the public, or let's say from the purchasers, the distributors. The distributors are like, oh yeah, we'll be able to make money off of this, no problem. So they sell it. So the content creators are having all this pressure, right? But the distributors are like, oh, it's free for all, it's free game for the public. Like, who cares? Even though there's going to be regulations regulating that, more coming soon. And then on my end, doing conscious media, I'm receiving more pressure than if I had been writing a script on a slasher. I'm getting so much pressure, and I have, thankfully, a full board of advisors that tell me what's right or not right, that like help assist me with that, because I started working with this director who had the perfect concept that was perfect for my script, and I was, we had a booth together at VRLA, like we did the whole 9, and then the distributor that is interested in our movie came up and saw him and was like, oh, Adam, you're not going to give me nightmares again, are you? And it totally ruined my chances with working with that distributor, because I had been working with a director who had previously created a slasher, even though it didn't go viral or go public. So that's the pressure that we feel, even though the challenge is amazing and thrilling, and I love the challenge of being able to create something that's different, and you only make a difference by creating something that's different.
So I know you had a follow-up, or you what? Yes, go ahead.
Back to the previous remark around, there's some reference to research on UCLA, and I was wondering, are there IRB precedents for studies on the effects of these immersive experiences? And are they being sort of at all policed in terms of human subjects, in terms of children, certain age?
So the question is, Right. The question really is, again, back to ethical standards. For those of you that live in the academic world, which several of us on the panel and the woman back here do, when we conduct any type of research, we have to go through internal review boards where they're really looking at the damage this could be done on human subjects, so that we don't have another Stanford prison experience again, or some of those kinds of things. And so that's the question that she's asking to the panel. I just want to say briefly about that. Certainly our university does, and the universities that I've talked to have, and also being part of the American Psychological Association, I know all of those do. I've actually was working with a pediatric psychology large practice where they were working with phobia treatment for in a VR experience, and so they were very stringent about that. But what we're talking about is a lot of, and this is my wild west comment, a lot of this stuff is being created so quickly and being thrown out there that you don't. If we're in a university setting or we're in a healthcare setting, we have to go through these IRBs. But a lot of these things aren't yet. So I think that answers it. But does anybody in the panel want to say more?
And the research that I'm doing currently, in order to get IRB approval would be pretty much impossible, because it is viewing something that would be very emotional, a crisis, in VR. So the way I have to approach it at this particular point, because they're so careful about the ethical responsibility of the impact on people that you research, is I have to use archival data. And so I'll be using social media, Twitter feeds of self-reported emotional reactions, because I'm not able to, to do that. So, and so they're very, very careful, and I'm happy to see that. But then they've got people also that a paper just came out several months ago, and I think his name is Lemley and Volkov, and that they just did, and they're out of Stanford and out of the law department there. And they're looking at, well, what are the legalities of experiencing something in a virtual reality environment? If you are harmed in there, what does that mean? How do they prove it? What is the legal implications when you're in an environment with two people, or you're interacting as an avatar and something happens and triggers some sort of adverse behavioral change or emotional reaction? What are the implications? I mean, we don't even have laws on the book that address this, but they're starting to. So I'm just now starting to see things come out. But like Dr. Hogg was talking about, she has seen much more so on the internal, the review board and the academic side, the ethical responsibilities and how they handle it. But it's just now starting to get in more into the consumer side. But it's very new.
So I know we had a few other questions here. Dave?
With these new, more immersive technologies, doesn't it up the ante to teach our kids to be media literate? So in other words, you can make an argument that Mein Kampf shouldn't be in the library, but then again, if we want to have a country where people have a choice of whatever kind of experience they want, isn't it incumbent upon us to do a better job to make the consumer responsible, to be able to think more critically about the choices they make? When it comes to fake news, when it comes to a fake, you want to say a fake immersive experience, it ultimately becomes the consumer's responsibility. That's on parents and educators to train our kids, essentially, if they don't make those choices.
So the question or statement posed to the panel really has to do with media literacy and the idea that as a community, as parents, as teachers, educators and all, isn't it incumbent on us to provide that kind of knowledge? So again, getting back to that sort of savvy consumer type of ideas. The panel?
I would say absolutely. And it has been throughout history. And I do believe the day is coming where at an early age the educational institutions will talk more about this, because it's in the classroom. The students are with their smartphones, and there's no way to turn it off, and not that we'd want to. So it is a new way. How many people in here are parents? This is probably something I imagine you deal with daily, but with the VR and AI and AR, I'm sure everyone else will say it brings up all kinds of new challenges?
So, as a parent and also as a technologist, looking at this, at the core, this is a new medium to accelerate the transfer of knowledge. Arguably, it's a medium that can do this in a higher level of simulacrum of reality than ever before. You know, you go back and everyone speaks of some of the first films and the train rushed in and people screamed and ran out. And you go to today and my son will watch Guardians of the Galaxy, and to him, that level of CGI is just the de facto standard. At the same time, to do good virtual reality costs more money. It has a higher level of quality. Our children are being raised in a level where they're going to be able to ascertain. Our human brains work as these incredible pattern detectors. And so they're going to be able to ascertain what's real and what's not. And it's going to be harder and harder to hold this back. So if we go 10 years in the future and everyone's got their own POV camera they throw in like a hat, and all of a sudden something occurs and somebody's able to jump in and experience that same real-life event from 3 or 4 different perspectives as it was actually captured with the ability to look around, the idea that we're approaching this from is the better you can facilitate that transfer of knowledge, the more the individual, the final viewer, will be empowered not only to receive that knowledge but then make choices around it.
But I think it comes down to what Ty said as well, but also as parents, we're older, and this technology is new for us. And I love seeing people that are older here because we want to learn and we need to learn. And we need to still guide our children. And we can't be expecting our children to explain technology to us because if they want the technology, they're not going to explain it fully. So we still need to take the parental role and not create knowledge for ourselves, say, what is this technology about? And really understand it so that we can make better decisions for our children. And it comes to that. But this is a great way of imparting new knowledge, without a doubt.
So I hate to wrap it up, but it is that hour, and I wanted to, before we do break, is to have a takeaway from each one of you so that we bring that with us. So go ahead, and we'll start with you, Ty, all the way down there.
Certainly. So on that same note, I'd say we've got 7 billion people on this earth. We are quickly running out of resources. What are we going to hit? Are we going to hit our resource date in October or August this year? Do you know? From sustainability? Each year there's a date where they say we should be using 12 months worth of resources, and we're doing it 3 or 4 months early every year, and it's getting faster and faster. With the political climate, we know what it is. So from that perspective, as a last note, I'll say that by bringing technology into this world that allows you to take a true first-hand perspective, an in-body immersive perspective, and learn from that, and by utilizing core concepts as old as time, such as incredible storytelling married with these new technologies, when the technology disappears and gets out of the way, that's when we as humans can simply communicate. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to do a better job communicating with each other, in turn to be able to learn a little better and make the world just a slightly smaller place.
Okay, so that was wonderful, but we need like a really short takeaway.
All right. 1 in 9 people are in a crisis situation in the world. Actually, 1 in 9 children live in a crisis situation in the world. And if just from that perspective alone, I know we talked about a lot of different perspectives, but from that perspective alone, this technology has an ability to create knowledge and behavioral change to help the least among us, the most vulnerable of us. And I think in that way, it can be very, very positive, and I'm excited to be part of it.
If we were to close our eyes and open them again 100 years from today, we would see a world that we can hardly imagine. It's a wonderful world with self-driving cars and airplanes and having the knowledge of Einstein in our brain and clean air, thanks to the work Kiernan's doing to breathe. So when you're thinking about artificial intelligence, remember it can be very good.
When you're looking at technology, know that the experience is greater than everything else. Experience is undefeated. And know your why. Know why you're doing this. Why are you using the technology? Why are you telling this story specifically? So my takeaway is know your why.
Very nice. And on that note, the aspect of what you want to make your viewers feel, because people remember what they feel about you, not what you wore, or what you looked like. They remember how you make them feel. So really focus on that with your content or any of your applications or technology that you're building. Come check out our booth, Truth for Gold, in the booth pavilion. We have full demos, HP campaign that we did for their unreleased wireless VR backpack, as well as our NASA VR hackathon we did, Compton versus Oakland. Come watch some solution-based content and come say hi to me and sign up for our newsletter and stuff. So thank you all for joining us.
So I love the Maya Angelou reference that you had there. And I want to thank everybody for joining us today. We will be at the Fielding Graduate University booth there in the expo hall. Ty said that he would bring his equipment over so that you can try some of those experiences. And thank you.
Thank you.
Really?